So now that you understand more about resourceful controllers, and you've learned that this is basically equivalent to this, let's move on to discussing how we can submit a patch and delete request from a form. Now, as you may know, from a typical form in the browser, you can of course submit a get or post request. However, patch and delete are not supported at the time of this recording. So to allow for that, well, we got to be a little bit tricky. Let me show you how we take care of that in Laravel. I'm going to start by visiting my project's controller. And let's imagine that we will edit an existing project. So I'll come down to this edit method here. So this will respond to example.com/projects/ a specific project /edit. Okay, so I'm going to start by loading a view. And again, we'll stick to this convention of the project's folder name and then the name of the method. Very common. Okay, so if we go into Resources, Views, Projects, we already have files for index and create. I'll add another one here for edit. But now at this point, you can see we're reproducing a full block of HTML for every file just to be quick. I'm now going to make things a little more clean. I'm going to create a new file in my views directory, and I'll call it layout.blade.php, and this is where we will have our master HTML. Within here, we'll have a container, and I will yield the content. Now, because we're working with forms, I'm going to quickly pull in a little CSS framework just to make things a little bit cleaner and quick for me. Nothing here to concern yourself with. Okay, so now from our edit file, I can extend the layout file, and then we'll set up a section for the content. All right, edit project. Now, I believe we have some dummy projects already set up from a few episodes ago. So why don't we access the project with an ID of 1? Project/1/edit, and there we go. Okay, so it sounds like our first step is to fetch the related project. Now, I gave you a little teaser in the last episode, but you know what? I'm going to make you wait one more episode before we talk about that. It's called route model binding. I think you'll like it. Until then, let's do it traditionally. Project, find, but now think about it. We sort of want to say, well, find me the project equal to whatever the user specified here. And as it turns out, because we set that up as a wildcard, Laravel will pass it right through. We'll call it ID. So real quick, let me just return that ID, and you can see we get access to whatever the user types in there. Cool. So let's grab the ID, track down the project, and then pass it through to the view. Now, one thing to think about is, what if the user provides a project ID that doesn't exist? Like, what if they provide this? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. For now, we have our project. We'll assume it exists. We load our view, and it sounds like we need a form to modify it. Now, you'll remember, at least for our demo, a project simply consists of a title and a description. So I'm going to use a snippet here to quickly whip this up. We have our title. We'll call that title. And nothing too fancy here. We have our label and our input. Okay. Next, we need our text field, or text area, and this will be for the description. Finally, we just need our submit field. We'll call it update project. All right, and I think that should do it. So we have our title, our description, as well as a button to update the project. And actually, real quick, let's give this a class of title just to make it bold and large. So if I switch back to the browser, here is what we get. But think about it, we're editing a specific project, which means these inputs should already be populated. Okay, with that in mind, let's set the value of this input equal to the title from the project we fetched. So now if I switch back and refresh, there we go. Let's come down and do the same thing here for the text area. We want the project description there. Okay, give it a refresh, and now we have information straight from the database. I'll prove it to you. My first project, lorem ipsum var. Come back, refresh, and now we are fetching it. So at the moment, I can edit any project. Here's 2, 3, 4. Let's go back to the first one. If we're following a RESTful approach that we talked about in the last episode, this edit form should submit a patch request to this endpoint. Correct? Okay. Well, as we discussed, though, there is no method patch that we can use in the browser. We can give it a shot. For example, /project/project ID. Okay, let's take a look. Refresh. I'm going to view the source, and yes, here we are specifying a request type of patch to the correct endpoint. But if I make a change and I update the project, what happens here? Well, it looks like it just defaults back to get. It doesn't understand what we want. So instead, we're going to stick with a traditional method of post, but then we're going to secretly tell Laravel, well, what I actually meant is I want a patch request. And the browser doesn't support that. It doesn't understand it. So I'm going to do a traditional post request, but then I'm going to sneak in a little note to Laravel that says, what I really want here is a patch request. So please route accordingly. We do that through a helper called method field. Patch. Yeah, I know it's a little awkward, but that's what we got to do. It's fairly common in most similar frameworks. So anyways, if we give this a refresh and view the source, that method field function expands to this. So what's happening is we're adding a hidden input that will be submitted to our server. Laravel is going to pick up on this and look for an input with this name. And based upon the value we provide here, it will route accordingly. Which means if we did everything correctly, we should hit our update method. Because remember, just to reiterate, if we pull up our routes, we said right here, respond to a patch request to project/project ID and load projects controller/update. So all I'm going to do here is say, hello. And notice this DD function. You'll reach for this often. DD stands for die and dump, and it's useful for very quick debugging. If you just want to make sure, am I hitting this part of the code, you can run DD. And we can talk about that more later in the series. Okay, so let's come back. And hold on, before I hit this button, what do you think will happen? All right, well, we hit it, and we get that 419 again. We talked about this in the last episode. We get the 419 because Laravel's trying to protect us from cross-site request forgery attacks. So what did I tell you? Whenever you have a form, always make sure that you add the CSRF field. Okay, so now we'll give it one more shot. I'll hit update, and as expected, we hit that method. Great. So now, if we want to fetch all of the updated fields, I could say die and dump all of the request data. Let's give that one a shot. We'll make a change here and another change there. Update it. All right. So as part of the form submission, we of course have the method and the token, which we can ignore, but we also have the updated title and the updated description, which means we can take that data and update our project. Let's do it again like this one more time. We'll manually fetch the project. Then we'll say, all right, well, the project title is going to be the updated title. And then the project description will be the updated description that we got right here. Again, we're not yet doing any validation. I'm saving that for a full episode coming very soon. So just keep that in mind. We always need to do validation when accepting user input. But anyways, we've updated it. We'll now hit save or call save. And at this point, the project has been updated. So where do we go? Well, why don't we just go back? Traditionally, you might go back to a specific project page, but I don't think we've done that together yet. Yeah, that's blank. So why don't we just redirect back to all projects? Redirect to /projects. And we'll give it a shot. So one more time, I will say my updated first project. We hit the submit button, and there we go. Let's update the project with an ID of 2. My updated second project, and we'll say updated here 2. Update it, and there we go. So here's your homework, and I'll show you the answer in the following episode. You now know how to show a form to edit an existing project. And we learned that if you ever want to submit that form to something that's other than a GET or a POST request, well, browsers don't really understand it. So we have to sneak it in. We need a way to tell Laravel, yes, I know we're doing a traditional POST request, but what I actually want is a patch request, so please treat it as such. We also learned, once again, that for virtually any form, you want to include CSRF field to provide that extra protection. So now, using all of that information, what I want you to do is this. On your edit form page, add a link right here to not update the project, but delete it entirely. So in your head, you should be thinking, well, what request type should I use to signal that I want to delete the project with an ID of 2? Work on that on your own, and then in the next episode, I'll show you the answer.